Welcome back, Making It Nation. Welcome to another episode of Making It with Chris G, where we have conversations with people in the world of entertainment who are making it from behind the scenes to the spotlight, sharing their stories and insight to help you get one step closer to making it. Thanks everyone so much again for coming back and for listening. If it's your first time, welcome to the show. I hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode with Matt Cottingham. If you didn't have a chance to check it out, please, I want to encourage you to do, because the entertainment attorney is often the first person on your team. And Matt had a lot of great insight to share and some value bombs that he was dropping. And in the interview with Matt, he mentioned one very important lesson. So when you are interested in getting an entertainment attorney, when is the right time? Usually it's whenever you're presented anything that has words on it that you need to sign. Whenever you're presented with a contract or any kind of agreement that you need to sign, you should have an entertainment attorney look at it. And Matt kind of covers that and so much more in last week's episode, so please check it out. If you don't subscribe yet on iTunes, please do. Please subscribe on iTunes. Leave us a review. Subscribe on Podcast Addict. Those reviews and those subscribes, they help so much. It helps us get up in the rankings. It gets more people listening to the podcast and helps us bring more stories and more interviews to all of you, and hopefully bring some sponsors on board so we can share more great insight and valuable lessons with everyone that's listening. We'll soon be available on SoundCloud and YouTube, so stay tuned for that. I will let you all know where to go to listen to the show when it's ready. And let me know what you want to see. What kinds of stories do you want to hear? Do you want to hear from more artists? Do you want to hear from more booking agents, managers? What stories and what lessons do you want to hear about, and what do you want to learn about the entertainment industry? And it doesn't have to be just music. It can be film, it can be movies, it can be comedy, sports. You let me know. The best way to get in touch with me is either on email. It's Chris Goyzueta, Goyzueta @gmail.com. It's also at Chris Goyzueta on Twitter and Instagram. That's where I usually hang out the most when it comes to social media. So find me there and let's connect. Don't be shy. Let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you think about the show. Let's keep in touch. I hope to hear from y'all. Let me share one quick lesson for the week. We have a two-parter coming up for this week and next week with an artist named Emily Kopp, and she has a really great story, and we'll get into that in just a second. But lesson for the week, this will be a quick one. If you're interested in the world of entertainment, if you're interested in getting into this industry, whether it's as an artist, as an entertainer, or working behind the scenes, working on the business side of it, and really that goes with anything in life, right? If you're an aspiring entrepreneur trying to start your own business. So the lesson for the week: are you ready to make this your lifestyle? If you want to be in this business, it has to be a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's not a career. So a typical schedule, I don't know if you guys listened to the interview with Alec Vidmar, the booking agent. Definitely encourage you and guys to check that out. That was episode number 7, I believe, and was the third interview of the Nashville series. But Alec talks about his schedule. And usually, he rolls out of bed around, say, call it 8 o'clock, and doesn't have to be in the office till 9:30, 10. So that doesn't seem like too bad of a day, right? A lot of people start their days much, much earlier and have to be in the office by 7 a.m. So Alec works from 10 a.m., call it until about 6, 7 p.m. Still not too bad of a day, right? 8, 9 hours in the office, not too shabby. But then he goes to see shows 4, 5 nights a week. And at those shows, he's meeting with managers, with the artists, with other agents, other people in the industry, basically networking and building relationships. That's the other big part of this business. You have to build genuine relationships, and that requires going out and meeting people and talking to them and spending time with them. With that said, covering that many shows a week, a lot of times you don't get out until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, don't get home until about 3. So now having to be in the office at 9:30, 10 o'clock doesn't seem that late anymore, right? It comes up pretty quick. So again, you have to be willing to make this industry a lifestyle. It's not just a clock in and clock out kind of career. You have to become part of the scene and become a voice in the scene. By becoming a voice is you by getting involved, by blogging, by tweeting, by just anything. Just be as involved as you can. Get engaged in the conversation. And when it comes to building relationships, it's about giving more to those relationships than you ask. Always try to help and give back to those relationships. It's Gary Vaynerchuk's 51-49 rule, right? You always try to give more than you ask to the relationships. So if you're willing to make the entertainment industry a lifestyle, and you build genuine relationships and you give more than you ask, you're on the right path of building a long and successful career in this business. So since I used Alec as the example earlier, when you heard his story, when he was sharing his insight, he started out just doing any job possible for venues, for the managers he worked with, for the promoters he worked with. He did everything. He started literally from the bottom and is now a very highly respected booking agent in Nashville, has been nominated for Young Professional of the Year. I mean, these are great successes. And that's because he always gave back to relationships more than he asked. And he still does it to this day, even at the level he's at already. And that's why he's going to continue to keep growing in this business. And if you're interested in getting into the entertainment industry, that's the kind of lifestyle you have to follow. These are the kinds of people you should surround yourself with and learn from. So that's the lesson for the week. So let's get on to today's interview. Today, our guest is Emily Kopp. She's a singer-songwriter that was originally based in Orlando, Florida, where I met her, and is now based in Nashville, Tennessee. Emily started her journey writing original music after being inspired by other artists at the Plaza Live, where she worked as a runner, kind of running things behind the scenes. From the day she wrote her first song, everyone around her became immediate believers and knew that she's got it. Soon after, she started touring the Southeast in her junior year of college and booking her own shows and making it happen. She has opened up for artists and toured with artists such as Matchbox 20, Brandi Carlile, Michelle Branch, Parachute, Boyce Avenue, The Gin Blossoms, Marc Cohn, ZZ Ward, Phillip Phillips, and the list goes on and on. After a few years of touring, she decided to take a sabbatical and backpack the world with her girlfriend, having visited places such as New Zealand, Thailand, Vietnam, Israel, Argentina, and many more. Emily is currently having massive success in licensing her music with her side project Midnight Riot, having songs placed in commercials for brands such as JetBlue, Mini Cooper, Urban Outfitters, Mary Kay, LG Mobile, Amazon, Honey Bunches of Oats, and this list also goes on and on. Very impressive. Emily has recently moved to Nashville to continue her pursuit in the music business as a songwriter. Recently, she has released a live album called Orlando in dedication to the victims of the tragic Pulse shooting in Orlando, Florida. She is currently working on her next original project and project for Midnight Riot. In this two-part series, we are going through her amazing journey and share some valuable insights and lessons. It's amazing to think that she has already accomplished so much in her short career, and she still has the ability to do so much more. I'm excited to call her a great friend and have her playing my wedding in February. Shout out to my fiancé, Alicia. I hope you enjoy this two-part interview with the one and only Emily Kopp. Hello, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So all the great music y'all been hearing in this podcast and the intro music and everything, this is this lady right here in front of me, Miss Emily Kopp.
Woo, woo.
Woo, woo. So we just finished up our Nashville series on this podcast. We had 4 weeks of episodes in Nashville, and even though we're not in Nashville now, this is very fitting because you live in Nashville now.
I do.
So what brought you to Nashville, and how are you liking it so far?
I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot so far. I had been planning on moving to Nashville, which I'm sure you definitely know this, but I'm sure people that are listening don't know this. I had been planning on moving to Nashville for a very long time, and I sort of postponed it because I had been based in Orlando for quite a while, and the band and I were touring out of Florida for quite some time, and career-wise, it was about time to make the move to Nashville, and it felt right, and the timing was opportune, and I decided to just make the move and go where I felt I was supposed to be.
Cool. Awesome. I noticed in Nashville they have a really great food scene. It's not just a music city, but the food is awesome. And we talked about some spots. What's your favorite place to eat so far in Nashville?
The food is out of control, I would say. It's really good. And I don't even think I've scratched the surface on the food scene. But my favorite place so far, which I know is also one of your favorite places, is Mas Tacos. It's cheap.
How would people in Nashville feel if we say Mas Tacos is our favorite place to eat?
They probably are like, these fools don't even know. Yeah. I don't know. The newbies, as a newbie, it's my favorite place. Right. And like I said, haven't even scratched the surface. But it's always a good backup go-to place when you're not really sure where to eat. There's no food in the house. I mean, my girlfriend and I cook pretty regularly. We don't eat out too much. But when we're in a bind, the go-to so far has been like, let's go to Mas Tacos. Cash only, super cheap, always delicious. If you go when there's, not a ton of people waiting in line outside, it's probably like your best day ever.
Right.
Yeah. You won the taco lottery when that happens.
You won the taco lottery.
Like when there's no line at Mas Tacos.
You told me when I asked you if you've ever been to Mas Tacos, you said your last meal before you die, you wanted to be at Mas Tacos.
It's delicious. And you can just get, like, the tacos are $3. And also it's like, I do feel like the people who work there make you feel cooler for being there. There's this aura of, like, you have to be a certain level of, like, trendy cool just to, like, eat there. So just by walking in, you feel slightly cooler about yourself. I don't know why everyone who works there
I'm in a really hip place
has like really cool hats and wears like ripped shirts and really tight jeans. So you just kind of feel like you're in a really trendy spot and like cheap taco. It's the whole vibe of the whole place.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
awesome.
Great. I really recommend it for anybody that's a first timer going to visit. And if you're local, check it out anyway. Free plug, Mas Tacos.
Free plug. The iced coffee has horchata in it. It's really good. It's delicious.
Yeah, it's so good. I remember having that. Yeah. Well, speaking of plugs, we're hanging out at the Barley and Vine Craft Beer Garden in Orlando.
Yeah.
First time ever doing a podcast in this kind of setting. This is kind of fun.
We're outside. To paint a picture for you guys, we're outside. And, I mean, there are a few people out here as well. But it's good vibes here. We're just hanging on a couple beers and enjoying the weather. So
you moved to Nashville to help like further your career in music, and has it been? And we'll go through your stories in a few, but
sure.
Has it helped you so far, like making new connections and meeting people? I know you know a few people already. How's it been?
It's been really cool so far. I think it's coming on 2 months now, so I don't really feel like I can say for sure because it's only been a couple months, but I do feel like I've gone into it with the mindset of not trying to be opportunistic in the sense of making connections all the time. Right. I'm just trying to be in a place where there are people doing similar things that I'm doing, and to be surrounded by other creatives and peers, and be a part of a community where new things are happening, and there are a lot of like young entrepreneurs in all artistic realms. I mean, even like in food, and music and all types of things. And so just making friends is a huge part of it, not going into it saying I'm going to be in this city to make connections and I can't wait to go network and schmooze with this one and that one, but just being in a place where there are like-minded people, hopefully, and making good friends and finding your people within that you can go and make really cool shit with. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think going into it with that mindset has been the most important thing so far. And so far, so good. It definitely is an existing community full of like good people. Right. And you find each other, you find the people you click with. And so far that's happened. And I'm sure it's going to continue to happen. And
yeah, like people over there collaborate a lot too. Like it's like a real cool community. Like people will support each other. They collaborate with one another. They help each other out however they can. It's definitely different from other cities that I've seen in the entertainment industry.
100%. And there's, I talk a lot about this with a buddy of mine, Wes Harley, and because I've been so, like not amused, but I've been really trying to figure out what Nashville's about. Being new to town and not wanting to jump in and just be like, I live here. Like let's be, I just really sitting back and trying to like observe what's happening. And there's a total respect for, I hate the word grind. I love it, but I also hate it. Not grind, but there's a respect for people doing what they want to do, whether it be opening up a coffee shop, whether it be pursuing a songwriting career, whether it be opening up a graphic design business or being a touring musician. There's
respect of people trying to pursue their dreams and not just talking about
100%, and it's
going
not
through the grind, the hustle,
and so people kind of come up together in different levels and stuff. So that part's really cool. You know, a lot of people go there and they work at coffee shops for 5 years before they're ever like a full-time songwriter, and that's not looked down upon. That's like respected, and there's not so much. You know, it's not like, what do you do to make money? People say, like, what do you do? And if you're a songwriter in your soul, in your heart of hearts, it doesn't matter how you pay your bills. It's what you are and what you do. And you're a songwriter. Right. And there's this aura of, like, total respect for that pursuit. And it's a really, really cool thing to be surrounded by at all times. It's neat. It's really neat.
Yeah. I definitely feel that when I go to visit Nashville, and obviously that's one of my favorite cities to go visit. It's growing so damn fast. Like it's like Crane City right now. You go watch downtown.
It is. Downtown. It's being it's out of control. I hear people are saying, you know, if you're planning on living here and being here, like, buy your house now because it's getting out of control.
Get in before it turns into New York or LA.
Yeah, right. It's getting crazy, but it still feels like a small town, which is really cool. And it's been really welcoming so far. Yeah. It's scary moving to a new place, but I had a small network of friends going into it, which was really comforting. And I think just like moving anywhere, surrounding yourself with people that support you and who you support, and with anything, just being around good people.
Yeah,
that
makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just finding your people, and it's all about. I don't really think it's about the place, really. Right. Anywhere, you can go to the most beautiful of places, and if you don't have your people there, it doesn't feel like home.
Right.
And so I think having that's really important, and I'm hopeful that Nashville will be a place that, you know, we want to stay for a long time. Yeah.
Let's talk about your journey to Nashville. So let's start from the beginning, from little Emily.
We're gonna need way more beer.
Way more beer for that.
Oh, boy.
Tell me about the first time you picked up an instrument and how it made you feel.
I picked up an instrument at a very young age. I just remember just always being musical. It was never an active decision, like, oh, I'm going to pick this up and do this. It was just an inherent part of who I was. So I don't think I actively realized how I was feeling. It was just something that it was like breathing or eating, and music was just a part of that too. It was
how old were you when you
natural.
When you started playing, you think?
I don't know, maybe as young as like 10 or 11. I remember playing like beats and stuff, like my dad and I jamming in the car and singing. So singing was always huge. I was in the choir when I was younger and in school musicals, and the first real instrument I took seriously was the drums, and I played drums for a really long time throughout middle school. And then I did play guitar a bit. I was taught a few chords by my father, and then I kind of took it from there on my own when I was in college and taught myself the rest. But it's just always been a part of.
Always been a part of
who I am. Yeah.
Now, before you started playing, like you're writing your own original music, you told me once you started playing mostly like cover gigs.
Yeah.
And tell me about the story. Tell the listeners the story of when you first got inspired to start writing music on your own and start taking a shot at this, making a career out of this.
Sure. Well, I didn't think music. I don't know. It always seemed like this hard to reach, impossible, non-realistic pursuit. My home and my upbringing was fairly conventional as far as what people did for a living, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just wasn't surrounded by creatives who did any of that for a living. So like my mom is very, very creative, but it wasn't something that was done for a living. She's very artistic. She cooks, but so at heart she's a creative, but it wasn't something that was done day to day as a job. So
Right.
I'd never had that as something to look up to, because I didn't know it existed at all. I thought there were only certain things you could do to make money.
Right.
So growing up and going to private school and then going to college and having all of those privileges and of course education was a huge part of it. But I was always involved in sports and I was always involved in music. But at the core, it was always like, okay, you're gonna study in college,
Right.
maybe go to grad school if you want to, or don't. But whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna get something in the professional. I'm putting up quotations in the professional field, and it never occurred to me that existed.
You're gonna do the cliche thing and go do your 4 years in college and get the job right out of college and work your way.
But it
up.
doesn't seem cliche when you don't know that something else exists. You
Right.
don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So when my mind first was blown was when I met you, actually, when I started working at the Plaza Theater in Orlando, and I saw that there was this whole subculture of people playing music that maybe you didn't hear on the radio or that weren't in the mainstream eye, but that still succeeded in a really beautiful way in their own right, and they toured and they played theaters or clubs or whatever it may be. And I had no idea that even existed because I was never exposed to it.
Right.
And so the second I was exposed
So
to it, my mind.
You have to play in arenas and stadiums.
Yeah, because you don't really. I mean, I now from where I'm seated, I look out at the general public, and not to be judgmental or anything, but you don't know what you don't know, and so when you're only paying attention to certain things, such as the radio or whatever it may be, you just don't know that anything else exists. That there is an upper middle class of being a music, or a middle class, or there are so many different avenues within music. Now I know people who write songs for a living and they're home all day and they go basically into the office and they write songs, or people who work on songs for films and in television, or people who put those songs in television, and people who work at music venues, and people who are tour managers. And there's this like whole world within music that you just don't realize exists.
Right.
And there's a home for everybody.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's one of the craziest things when I first started in this business. I mean, who books the shows? How do the shows happen?
Yeah.
Who runs the shows? Like, who are all the people behind the scenes? And it's amazing how many different jobs and careers and people there are involved in that whole process. Like, it's not just, I don't know, Beyonce calls up the Amway Center and she puts her own show. No, there's lots of people and lots of big teams that goes behind that. So.
And Beyonce has a band and a musical director and probably like a couple of, tour managers and assistants, and there's like a whole world, and that's just on a main huge scale. But there's also,
or even on a smaller scale, I don't know why that's the first name
I
threw out. And we talked about Beyonce
because
before.
Beyonce, that's why, because Beyonce. But there's a whole world that my mind was opened up to, and it just, in a good way, shattered everything I had ever known to be true. And that's when my personal growth as someone in college started to happen, and started to believe in something else other than what I thought I was supposed to do, and started to challenge this status quo of all those things and what I was supposed to do.
Well, from when we first met, I knew you had the hustle in you. Because you literally hunted me down to intern at the Plaza. I remember when I think you've emailed me and tried calling, and in the music industry we get very busy and caught up in our day-to-day world sometimes, and we just don't have time to respond to everyone, which is sad sometimes. But you were super persistent, and I remember one day I get a call in the office, and the marketing director comes out from the Plaza, and she's like, there's this girl Emily on the phone, and she said she's on her way from Miami. She just wants 5 minutes to talk to you about interning at the Plaza.
That. It was true. My internship, I had an internship, I think it was my sophomore year at this point, at the UCF Arena, the University of Central Florida Arena, and I was working for the events and operations director. So I wasn't doing anything totally connected to music. I had to dress nice for all the events, and I sort of managed the staff there, and I got to, help with all of the meet and greets for all the artists, but I wasn't working directly with the artists. I was more on the venue corporate side of it, and so I had my office hours, and it was nice, but once that was over, I had to fulfill another internship credit, and I wanted to get it all over with within my first 3 years of college. I didn't want to think about it. So I was looking around town at all the different venues around Orlando, and I was majoring in hospitality and event management, so I knew I didn't want to work in a hotel. I knew I didn't want to work at Disney World or Universal, and I knew at that point that I still hadn't come to the conclusion that I could be doing music.
Right.
But I thought, I could be close to music and still have a corporate job, and that's kind of acceptable, right? So I reached out to the Plaza Theater. I totally did some serious stalker crazy research and found out that you were the guy booking it. And then I reached out, and I was still in South Florida where my parents live, and the semester was about to start a few days after, so I was going to be coming to Orlando anyway, but I needed this interview because I wanted to lock in an internship.
Right.
And literally, like, you guys didn't even answer my emails, like, at all. Nobody answered any of my. I sent my resume. I thought this is like a really cool place, and probably none of my peers at school are pursuing this because I kind of found the spots that nobody else thought was super cool, and found the spots that weren't super saturated. Everyone was trying to work at Disney, and everyone was trying to work at all the hot spots around town. And I said, here's this kind of like boutique theater, and I don't think anybody knows about it. Like,
how did you find out about it? Was it a specific show that you saw?
No, I was on Google, and I said, what are all the music venues in town? So obviously the House of Blues, the Social, which is like a club, but the thought of a theater, and the Hard Rock, all big box names. So I liked the idea that it was kind of a smaller operation. Really appealed to me. I thought that would be slightly easier for me to get my foot in the door because I honestly didn't think anybody else would be after it. So I saw the opening and then like harassed my way into it, basically. Is that how it worked?
When you start, I forget all the different jobs you were doing when you first started, but one of them was you were a runner.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know what a runner is, you're basically going around and assisting. You're like the middle person between the artist's tour manager and the venue's town buyer or booker, and you're helping the artist with whatever their daily needs are, with their hospitality, their green M&Ms, their excessive amounts of alcohol on their rider. And there was a point where was there a specific artist that you met that made you decide, hey, I can do this and I want to take a stab at this, or was it just all of it together?
So the first show I worked was Tab Benoit.
Okay.
That didn't really it was super cool and inspiring because I had never heard of him, and I thought like, how cool, this guy's touring the country. I've never heard of him. He obviously has a massive following.
Yeah, this guy from Louisiana playing Cajun blues, and there's 500 people that are rocking
die hard fans. It was incredible to see, each paying who knows what per ticket. It was really neat. But I think the first show that I connected with was the Joshua Radin show because that was music that I was listening to at the time. So it struck a chord. Oh, how punny! It struck a chord with me because that was something I could relate to.
Right.
And he was a younger guy and played music that I really connected to.
I still have that picture we took with him.
Yeah, and I had like this slight crush on him too, and I thought his show was beautifully done. And yeah, I think just listening to it's the moment when all of the hustle of the day comes together in a show, and then you get to sit back and watch it happen. And it was really cool to see, and I think that was the moment when I thought, like, wait, I didn't know this guy existed, and why did I not know he existed? What am I paying attention to? I'm obviously paying attention to the wrong outlets. Let me like tap into some other ways of finding music. You know, I need to start going to shows. I need to start paying attention to who's out there. So that was the first show I would say that kind of like shook me up a little bit.
Was it right around then when you took a stab at writing your own original songs?
Yeah.
And I know it's no longer a representation of your writing, but the first song that I remember that you said you wrote was the song Potential that had a really great hook and people fell in love with. And for a first song, like, when I heard it, I was like, wow, this girl, I mean, no pun intended, but this girl has potential. Like, it was a really, for a first-time writer, got some background noise there. What's that?
There's an airplane above.
So for a first-time writer, writing a song that has a real catchy hook that everyone in the office is singing and their friends are singing, I mean, it's a really cool thing. And I know it's not a song that you wanting to play live anymore, but you should still be proud of that moment because that's the first song you wrote. That's really cool. For
sure. And I think back on it, and it is cool to think back on because I don't, I look back on it now as something that I never want to play again, right. Like, oh, that's my first song. And it's kind of embarrassing because you listen to how you sounded, several years ago, but that always happens with every, as time has moved forward, that has continuously happened. I listened to things that I released 2 years ago, and a little part of you cringes because you're so stoked on it when it happens, right. And then you keep developing. I think the second you listen back to something, I talk about this with friends all the time, the second you look back at something from several years ago, and you feel like that is the best ever, and that's the best it's ever going to get, that's when you should be worried a little. Right. Like, wait, what? The second you look back and you think like, I wish I could still do that. Yeah. Or like, that is still the shit. Right. Like, it might still be the shit, but you should probably be thinking about doing things that are bolder and better and more developed and that are going to, like, you should always want to push yourself a little bit and never settle. And so I think it's also a good thing listening back to old stuff and feeling a little unsettled about it because it's a sign that you're growing a little bit. And that's something that I've had to, I've wanted to take down videos for sure. But it's also, I love going back on, Sarah Bareilles' old live videos and listening. And, I'm sure these people cringe. I'm sure she's like, oh, God, like, what was I thinking putting that out?
I mean, you're not selling out clubs or arenas, but you still have some fans that were there from the beginning. They're like, Emily, play Potential.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it has happened. But
it's like Bon Jovi's never gonna stop playing Living on a Prayer.
Yeah, and even though he probably hates his life for 3 minutes when he plays it. But yeah, I think it's a part of your journey, and I think it needs to stay out there. And I think it's cool to look back on because I'm like thanking 18-year-old me for like having
the guts to do it.
Guts and like no shame. Yeah. Thinking that was like the shit. Like I truly thinking that what you're doing is the coolest thing. Right. And believing in that product and that song or whatever it may be. Because if you're not going to think it's the coolest thing, nobody's going to think it's the coolest thing. Yeah, and that confidence shows on stage when you're performing it live in front of people, too. And now I look back on it, and I was like, wow, I really did think it was the shit, and it's not. Like, it's really not the shit. But I guess that's the cute part of it. But I think it's going to happen. I know 5 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, oh, man, like, I was making cool stuff, but wasn't as cool as I thought it was. You should be proud of those moments, because it's definitely at a level, I mean, art is art, and art's very subjective, but definitely, I feel like I was at a higher caliber level than you would expect out of a first-time songwriter, and I think it could still stand out there with other songwriters. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah. So, okay, you write your first song, and then you book your first original show. So, tell me about your first original show, and I think you opened for someone. I don't remember who, but tell me about that. Did I open for Zach Deputy? Was that your first show, or was it? Oh, it was Jeff Daniels. Jeff Daniels from Dumb and Dumber, the actor, comedian. An incredible folk songwriter. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, yeah. You came up to me and said, "How much original material do you have?" And I said, "I think I have 2 or 3 songs, maybe." And you asked if I could find something to cover 20 or 30 minutes worth of stuff. So I did, and I played, and I remember I sold some tickets to my college professor. She came. I think. Did my parents come? I think somebody must have come to something. I mean, I promoted it, and I was so proud, and I was so nervous, and I had an acoustic guitar, and I sat on this chair, and I had no stage presence, and I was so nervous. And he chatted with me before the show and said, "Hey, don't be nervous." Like, you could tell I was freaking out. Right. And he was like, just play within, like a 10-foot radius of yourself. Don't worry about anything else. And it was great. It was fine. And
so your first ever show, you got words of wisdom from Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
It was cool. Like, it was really cool. And I think that was like the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
Was that show, for sure.
And then what was the first show where, I mean, of course, the first one probably was pretty awesome because it was the first one. But, like,
yeah.
What's the first show where you're like, wow, this is amazing, or this is the shit? Like, what was that first show where you just had an awesome feeling when you're on stage?
Where it kind of all came to fruition, I would say, was my first CD release show, which was also at the Plaza in the small room, and we went all out and we hung up those like Chinese lanterns that you found, and there was a whole. I had a whole band at that point. Yeah, there was a whole backdrop, and I mean the production value. Honestly, to this day, I've never put on a show that had that much like production behind it. Because when you start touring, you're like, I don't have the time or money for this.
Right.
But it was a one-off CD release show, and it was at a place that I was working, and it just felt really like familial, and everybody came to support it, and my band members, their family came.
Right.
Everybody's families came, and my family from South Florida came, and it was packed like that. We packed out that room, and people believed in it because it was the first thing I had ever put out, and
this was
it was so different.
4 songs at the time.
It was like 4 or 5 songs, and everyone else. I think I spent a lot of my college years. I don't regret it. But I did choose to spend my college years either working or playing music. So, I didn't really give myself that typical college life.
Right.
Because I was just so in a tunnel vision mindset. And so once I had that, I wanted to like feed that beast, like that craves whatever it is that you feel when you're on stage.
Right.
And whatever, I wanted to chase something, and I wanted to feel like I wanted to get that something, whatever it was. And that something always evolves and has continued to evolve through the years. But once I decided that this thing was something I was going to chase, that's all I did. So I went to school, I did my thing, but it ended up kind of being on the back burner with my music and working at the Plaza being my priority. And it created a lot of conflict, I'm not going to lie, with my family. And
What kind of conflict did it create? Did it create any obstacles in pursuing your music career?
I think the obstacles that come your way are, or at least that came my way, it's rightfully so. Your parents being super worried.
Right.
You're going into a field, A, that nobody else has gone into in your family. B, that is super challenging. C, that nobody knows anything about. So there's no one to steer you in any direction. And meanwhile, you're in college and you're supposed to be doing this thing, and you're not doing that thing. You're doing a different thing, and it's, I think, worrisome. If my kid one day, my non-existent kid, like told me that they wanted to pursue music or anything, now knowing what I know, I would still support them. I mean, if my kid is like, hey, I want to be a professional, like I want to collect butterflies for a living, I'll be like, fuck yeah, like go collect butterflies. Like if that is where your heart is at, like collect butterflies all day. Like I love that idea. If you're happy, great. Am I going to be worried? I'm sure, because who collects butterflies? That's super strange. That's super foreign to me. But maybe there's like a whole world of butterfly collectors that I don't know about.
And going into the music industry, I mean, it's not, you don't go to college. I mean, yes, you can go to college to study music, but like you don't go to, it's not the typical college route. You go to study and play rock and roll or pop music and then get a degree in it and immediately have a job. No, there's no guarantee.
No. And the internal struggle for me that happened was, and there's also this conflict because you're like, at least for me, my mom and my stepdad and my grandma and everyone in my family was just like so supportive. They still showed up at the end of the day. They're still rooting for you, and they're still donating to your Kickstarter, and they're still coming to your shows, and but then they're also calling you, yelling at you for driving to North Carolina when nobody's coming to see you play. And
so let's talk about North Carolina. That's your first time you ever booked your own show, and it was were you trying to book like your first tour, or what was
I
the
don't
process?
know, man.
What's the learning experience you can teach to someone from that experience?
Well, to make a really long story short, I booked a show in North Carolina. It was like in the middle of the week. I had classes, and I just decided to go and play the show, and I told Chris about it, and we drove to North Carolina, and we played at some rock music club that I had no business playing in as like a solo acoustic songwriter at the time.
It was a metal.
It was a metal. It was the
club.
first music venue, I think, in
Was it the
Charlotte.
Milestone?
The Milestone.
So
Sorry, Milestone.
People that live in Charlotte, you all know about the Milestone.
It was a rainy day. When I say nobody was there, right? Nobody was there.
I mean, you had the bartender and
we had the bartender and some old guy who's still around. His name's the Funky Geezer, and he plays electric guitar, and he gets on the floor. It was the Funky Geezer and then myself. I basically played for you guys and the bartender. That was it, really, and it was just a lot of time and money that I'm not going to say was wasted, because I think I needed that experience to teach me right from wrong, and I don't think people can when people want advice, I don't think you can just sit back and tell everyone how it's supposed to happen, tell people how it's supposed to happen. I think you need to experience all of that grind and like all of those stupid decisions. I want to spare people making those stupid decisions, and I would love to be spared any potential future poor decisions. However, I think some of those poor decisions are necessary towards learning. I could talk to anybody until I'm blue in the face all day about what my experience was, but people need to make their own mistakes, you know?
What lesson could you teach them about booking their first show out of town?
Don't do it. That's stupid. It's stupid. But like I said, like I needed to do that. Like it was a stupid idea, but that was a part of my story. And so perhaps someone else needs to make several stupid decisions for that to be a part of their journey and lead them to where they're supposed to be. So I don't think you can, I mean, you could tell people your story, no one's path is the same, especially in this career. Like there's so many different ways to go about it, and you can't possibly predict how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Like you just can't. It's going to evolve and it's going to change. And as someone working for themselves doing art, you're never going to feel comfortable, and you're never going to feel safe, and you're never going to feel like you're where you want to be, which is also good because. At every level, you know, if 18-year-old me probably dreamt of just playing playing shows for people who would listen. Then when you get there, you dream of being a little bit more than that. And then when you get there, you're like, I want to get my song in a commercial. And then when you get there, you're like, but that's not enough. Like you always want to be doing, you always want to be doing something else. And I think it's also important through the journey to realize where you were 2 years ago and be grateful and take a moment to like let it all sit in, because I think that just comes with being that kind of a person and wanting to create good things that people enjoy and that you feel proud of. And so it's
not that experience didn't discourage you from touring though. At what point did you decide was the right time to go on the road again, and what'd you do differently this time?
We routed it properly, and it wasn't just a one-off, and even that was just it was a good experience that I think I needed to do. I mean, it was a trio, right? It was myself,
I remember that,
and then Mason, and then a guitar player named Abe. And
played some good shows on that first tour.
Played some good shows. I shelled out like a lot of money, and we stayed in hotels, which now I know that's not how it works. You know, like at the beginning,
tour, don't book hotel rooms every night.
And also, don't play in like 20 new cities that you've never been to before. That's just not the smart way to do it. So, but again, like I feel like I needed that. That's just a part of my story that I'm grateful for, and I needed that experience to learn what not to do and to teach me the lessons. And someone could have told it to me till I was blue in the face, but I needed to like actively go out and do it and be in it. And that's just how I learn. And yeah, that's just me, and I don't have all the answers. And I could sit here, like if John Mayer was in front of me, right? Like I could sit here and ask him all day, like, how did you get to where you are? And, blah, blah, blah. And he could tell me, but doesn't say that. It doesn't mean it's going to work for me. I'm not. Right. I'm on a different. Everyone's on their own path, and
you can't take the path of someone else and copy and paste it. This is not going to work. Like,
no, and I think doing things is what teaches you.
Right.
Listening, you can sit in class all day and listen, but I think actually doing things.
Sure.
You could learn how to write a song, but until you sit and write a song, you're not going to learn how to write a song.
Right.
You know that.
Yeah.
I think that's just.
You learn so much more by actually trying to apply it and making mistakes.
There needs to be context for all of these things.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so like I'm super grateful for all that stuff, and looking back now, I'm like, I was pretty ballsy. But yeah, I understand parents being worried, and I understand all that stuff. And now I think it feels even better having done all those things, because I think that having opposition and doing it in spite of whatever opposition presents itself, it makes it really worth it when you do feel validated, you know?
Right. Were there any big challenges or obstacles you had to overcome throughout your journey so far, and how did you handle those, and how would you handle them differently, if any, or what advice would you give us someone to handle those kinds of situations in the future?
I think I was talking to someone about this the other day. I was talking to Justin Beckler about this the other day.
Who's your producer?
Yeah, producer / homie. And and I feel it's funny because I could sit here all day and say, like, oh, I had so many challenges, and like, you know, at first my family was so worried, and there were always arguments about what I was going to do with my career and my life and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, though, I mean, really, I didn't have to worry about, like, there are people who succeed in spite of not only that, but who succeed in spite of, like, not being able to, like, buy food for themselves or have a roof over their head, or, you know, so overall, I do feel like the basic, you know, like, to be super blunt, you know, I am a middle class, I was an 18-year-old middle class taken care of girl who was given all the opportunities in the world to succeed, and was equipped with everything I needed to succeed. So the only opposition I did face was an internal battle, and I think that is opposition. Doesn't mean doesn't mean I'm less
was an internal
valid
of
having to navigate my own insecurities about whether or not this was something I should be doing, you know, like.
And at what point did you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do? I'm not going to go.
It's so hard. You just fail.
Job out of college, and I'm going to go pursue my dream. And
you just constantly fail. Like you constantly fail, and you have to wait until the next little success, and then that little success has to last you until your next little success. And in between successes, you might have several failures. Right. And so I think it's like budgeting your little success. Be like, okay, here was like a little win. I potentially have to make this win last a month, because I don't know. You know, I had an amazing show, for example, like to put this into context, like, yeah, last night was a great show and it felt really good. And okay, now I'm about to play like several really not fun 3-hour wine bar gigs where nobody's listening.
Now, why'd you play these wine bar gigs?
Because by this time, I guess fast forward, I graduated from college. And I didn't want to, you know, I had to pay my bills some way. And so I opted to do that rather than bartender or wait tables. But I mean, I just didn't want to. But
not necessarily that was the dream of playing wine bar gigs or menu venues, but those pay very well. And if you're on the tour, putting some of those in there, that actually kind of helps you tour and stay on the road, right?
Yeah. And then herein lies that same idea of what I mentioned earlier of like 18-year-old me, so like 22-year-old me who's playing 4 or 5 nights a week at different wine bars and restaurants and stuff. Like 18-year-old me like dreamed of that. Right. You know, all I wanted to do was play music and make money doing it. And then fast forward several years later, I was doing it, and suddenly it wasn't in the capacity I wanted to do it in. Now I was where I said I wanted to be, and suddenly it wasn't good enough. Like, I'm playing music, but it's not my music.
You constantly kept raising the bar.
You never are where you want to be. So then at 22, I'm like, shit, okay, this is cool. I'm making money, but I'm not making money playing my music, and nobody's listening, and nobody's coming to shows. That's what I'm aspiring for next. And then you aspire for the next thing. But I think it was important for me to take a step back every now and then and be like, okay, I chose this path, first of all, so I can't complain about it. And B, 18 and 19-year-old me would dream of making a living playing music in any capacity, whether it's my original music or not. So I was grateful to be able to do that. And yeah.
So let's see. So this is when you start playing or touring, and you start touring regionally, and you're playing these cover gigs. This was at 22, so 4 years after you started playing.
Probably around that.
You had already put your first album out, like your first full length, Serendipity, at that point.
Full length was in 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I was in New Orleans already when you put your first album out.
That's crazy. So. Was it 2013?
Together. I think it was 2013. I think it was when
December.
I was in New Orleans.
October or December, I think.
And then once you put that album out, did you have a little bit more of a plan and a strategy on how are you going to tour, play live, or are you still kind of flying blind a little bit and trying to figure out how to navigate through this crazy business?
I, at the time, wanted to continue touring. I wanted to do everything in my power to, instead of, being on the road once every other month for 1 or 2 weeks, my goal was to be on the road like 200 days a year and be playing original shows and be in a van with a band and sleeping on as many couches as I could and just making it work. And so, yeah, it was totally happening. And when I was home in Orlando, I played my gigs and whatever I needed to do just to like get by. And that was great. And those gigs also, I don't want to put them down because they do get your chops up in a whole nother way. Like, you're singing so many nights a week for 3 to 4 hours.
You strengthen your vocal cords, your guitar playing gets better. You just become a better musician by playing so much, especially for 3 hours at a time.
Absolutely.
4 or 5 times a week, yeah.
And playing with the same guys that you're touring with, so you're becoming more melded in with them, and it's just natural that chemistry is natural too. So when you're playing your own music, your own shows, like, you're communicating with each other in such a natural way because you play several nights a week together for 3 or 4 hours.
Well,
so
when you have a band, I mean, that's what you should be doing. You should be practicing and become.
And those were our rehearsals.
Those were your rehearsals, yeah. Having 4-hour gigs, that's a lot of practice time. That's more practice time than an original band that doesn't play any cover gigs does sometimes for an original show.
And you don't even think twice then. When it's time for a show, you're not nervous because you're so overly prepared. And then during those cover gigs, you're working, maybe a percentage of the people at those restaurants and bars and whatnot are listening, so you can really play around with new songs. And it was my opportunity to
take chances.
Exactly. And like my opportunity to practice soloing a little bit and try things that maybe I wasn't ready for in a proper live show setting, playing a real show. So in that way, I'm so grateful for it, also for that reason, just because I feel like my voice got strong, my guitar playing got strong, and my bond with the guys got stronger on a personal and musical level. So I encourage it. I think I'm grateful for it. Like, as much as I dreaded a lot of them, like I was, because you're playing the same covers over and over and over again. But
and you mentioned you've had some successes and good stories that happened up to that point too. What were some of those? What are some of your favorite memories of your journey up to that point?
Oh, man, there were so many, just from people who championed us. I mean, you being one of the first, and so getting to open for bands is a beautiful, very special experience that we soaked in and that meant a lot to me. And so, you're just given this audience that's there to see somebody else, and it's almost a challenge. You're like, I have a half an hour to 45 minutes to make these people love me, and they're gonna sit here and they're gonna listen, and I'm just being given this attentive audience. That's like a dream. So playing opening shows were always the most exciting for us and still are.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I look forward to, and it's a good opportunity to meet other people's fans and to see how other people on a bigger scale are running their show and are running their crew and are performing their set and how that works. And so it's kind of like when someone takes you under their wing and you get an inside peek into how that works. It's really, really neat. It's really neat. Some of like my favorite shows have been opening for people.
And you had quite a few people like take you under their wing, like all over the Southeast, at least at several venues. Like, what advice would you give someone to develop a good, positive relationship with a talent buyer or a venue or promoter or anybody really in the music industry? Like, I think you did a really great job at that. And
it's tough to say because I feel like the same question with moving to Nashville, right? And like going there with the intentions of networking and schmoozing. Right. It's like, I think
like
people
it has to
just
be like sincere.
It
right?
really
it
is,
real.
and
like,
it can't.
You can't just go in and try to get something.
Get
out of
stuff,
it.
and you can't fabricate like this like niceness. It has to you just really have to want to hang and get to know somebody. And like the people who took me, the thing is, the people who have taken me under their wings, whether it be for a long amount of time or something that was like short-lived, it was because neither party was looking for it.
Right.
It usually is just something that starts out really naturally and starts with small talk and, oh, you're playing here and, oh, thanks for coming and yada, yada, yada. Like perfect example, one of the first opening tours I did was 3 dates with Delta Ray, who we worked with a guy named Adam Taylor, who used to work at the Plaza Theater, and now he's their tour manager. And when they first started touring on a bigger scale, he basically told them to like invite me on, and that was such a huge and special experience to get a peek into that. And it was really amazing to see and really cool to be a part of. And then now sitting back and seeing how much they've grown. But from that experience, we had a show, for example, in another city in Florida. It was in Tampa. And the talent buyer there saw us play. And Kevin Stone, who I talk to regularly now. He's another huge champion of ours. And
he's now a talent buyer in the Jacksonville Theater.
Yep. The Florida Theater in Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, yeah.
And so after he saw us open, while we were doing these tour dates with Delta Ray, he and I kept in touch, and him knowing that I lived in Orlando and I was just an easy drive away to Tampa at the time where he was working, he invited me to open up as many shows as possible because he had just seen us that one night play at that one theater, and we instantly connected.
Of having a sincere connection, but also you had the chops too. So if people enjoyed the show, if you want to go up there and people like you as a person, but your show sucked, sure, they probably wouldn't invite you back.
Yeah, it's just I think exactly, and I think you need to go into things with no expectation of asking for anything. People, what I've learned is you can't. People will help you when they want to help you, and they there's no need to solicit for anything. And just getting to know people for the sheer you shouldn't need you shouldn't need a reason to be nice to people or to get to know people, other than the privilege of getting to know somebody. If that leads somewhere, then great. If not, well, that's just one more potentially cool person that you know. And I think that's something that you learn over time. I think, for example, me at 18 harassing you to get that job didn't know that yet, and I just wanted to get in and I don't know, it's just something I've learned is I've gotten older is I'm not here to just get in when I can and find the holes and the opportunities. It's just the connections will happen organically, and there's no reason other than just getting to know somebody.
So I always say you should focus on building positive and good relationships over trying to get something out of it. And another great way to do that is by giving back to those relationships. Give to them as much as you can instead of trying to get something out of it.
It's just a friendship, honestly. And in our world, I'm sure you feel it too. It's so hard to identify because the people you work with are also your friends. So there is no boundary, whereas most jobs, you don't have that connection. It's usually really separate and really clear. And so I guess the cool part about it, about what we do, also the confusing part about it, is also the combination of friendship and work, because most of the people I hang out with,
if you're stuck in a van with the same people nonstop and don't have your own private space, those worlds blend together all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. So, yeah, just.
So you're playing around the Southeast a little bit and up the East Coast, and now you're having a lot of success as a songwriter. Tell me about when you first started writing with other people. Like, how did that journey begin?
My first experience with co-writing, I had written with Justin Beckler a bit because he produced my first 2 records, and so he was my first experience working with a producer, and so he helped me on some co-writing things, but I didn't realize I was co-writing.
Right.
You know, he just kind of helped me out with finishing up some songs, and I didn't realize that I was actually co-writing.
Right.
And then Kevin Stone from the Ruth Eckerd Hall in Tampa invited me to open up a show for Matchbox 20. And it was it was a random one-off. And after the show, they tweeted about me. And this is such a crazy story. I can't even. It's just so strange.
Was it the band or was it Rob Thomas?
It was the whole band. It was the whole band. So I had this random one-off. I go and I play this show, and I'm like in dream world because it just seemed so like unbelievable. And it is. Like, it was just a really cool thing to be around. Like, Rob Thomas is just a monster songwriter and a monster performer. And the whole band, they're just monster. Like, it was incredible. And so they put it out into the interwebs. Emily Kopp, like, what a pleasure playing with you. And and so a few days later, I got an email from somebody named Katie, who lived in Los Angeles. And Katie worked for a licensing company. And she said, hey, I don't know who you are. I'm a huge fan of Matchbox 20. And I saw that they tweeted about you, yet I've never heard of you in my life.
Right.
Like, who are you? What's the deal? And I was like,
why are these people talking about you?
Yeah, and I got this email, and I thought it was so strange that some random person reached out to me, right? Like, what? And so I did some research, and turns out she did, and she still does, and she works for a licensing company and management company. And so we started talking, and she sort of took me under her wing. And she said, hey, have you ever heard of, like, co-writing? Have you ever written songs with other people? Do you know anything about licensing? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she said, I think you should come to Los Angeles. Have you ever been here? I think you're really good. I kind of want to take you under my wing, and I think you're really talented, and I'm glad that this random interaction happened and that I saw that they wrote about you on Twitter and I found you and blah, 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 blah. And you should come to LA. You can stay with me. Like, so far the story sounds incredibly sketchy. You should stay with me, and I'll set up some co-writes for you. And so I put a ticket on my credit card, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to Los Angeles for a week. And she was like, who are you staying with? And I was like, I don't know.
Some random stranger. What are you thinking?
And to this day, like, Katie is one of my really good friends, and she's awesome. So she introduced me to the world of co-writing and this whole, like, micro culture of, like, songwriters that all write together and make songs that wouldn't have been able to be what they are had it not been for that other person in the room. Right, having kind of other
creative minds and juices, like, collaborating into that.
Exactly. So that was my first introduction to co-writing, which was, like, a long story that led to that. But but basically that was it. I ended up going to LA. I kind of just took a chance, didn't know her. But, I mean, she's legit, you know. It wasn't some, like, random person trying to, like, kidnap me. It was like a
now for someone that is starting out, that is a songwriter, I mean, you can't just go write your first song and go to Max Martin and say, hey, will you co-write a song with me? Like, how do you get started? Like, what advice would you give someone, like, getting started as writing with other people? And how do you kind of, like, I guess, build up your credibility to be able to write with songwriters like you and other songwriters?
I think if nobody's making that intro for you, there's definitely, like, a certain etiquette that goes along with it. And in Nashville, I mean, I'm still kind of learning that. I would say, you know, find people who are where you're at, you know, find peers that are at your level that you can kind of grow with and come up with. I mean, don't reach out to people that you know like you have to be honest with yourself, you know, and you have to say, where am I? Who are my peers? Who can I grow with? Of course, writing with better writers is only going to make you stronger.
Right.
And if you can get into those rooms, then great. I mean, there are still co-writes that I think about, like, that LA trip, I don't think I had any business writing with half of those people, but she was generous and kind enough to make so many intros for me and take me under her wing in that way, and I'm forever grateful. And I feel like just find your community to grow with and find your friends that are doing it and find people in your city. Even if you don't know people, if you go to a local show, and there's another local band that's playing and this seems like someone who's also doing the thing and also starting out and also on your level and also trying to make it work. Like trial and error, and try and find your people that you can grow with. And eventually people, people will invite you to write too.
You don't have to be in Nashville or LA to co-write with other people, right? Like,
Definitely
why
not.
do you, I mean, of course, I feel like I know the answer to this, but like, why do you feel people go to those cities to co-write? Like, why is that happening more in Orlando or in Tampa or in Boise, Idaho?
I mean, I felt it living here. I would go to Nashville often just for a week of writes.
Right.
But you're not really a part of the community.
Right.
You're just going to visit, and you're just in and out. I think to really be a part of any community, you need to invest, and you need to commit and be a part of it as much as you can. And I think that means living there, and that means seeing these people day to day, and that means going to their shows, and that means supporting the people around you.
Do you feel if people in, like, let's say Orlando, since we're here, like if people in Orlando all of a sudden started collaborating with each other and started co-writing together more on a more frequent basis than it is happening, like more as it's happening in those big music cities, do you feel like the level of talent and songs that these people are producing would go up?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also hard to compare to some of these other cities because it's just a part of the culture. Like Nashville it's Music City. Like it's gonna take years, if ever, that some other places will ever reach that. I think for me there's a huge sense of nostalgia, and there's a huge place that Orlando has in my heart, because this is kind of like where I figured out and committed to pursuing music. This is where I played my first shows. This is where I sucked for so long, and this is where I got better for so long, and this is where I found my first bandmates. And so but I think to make things, at least at this point in time, to make things happen quickly, I mean, it's as easy as, like, I wake up in the morning, and if I don't have that much work to do, like, I can just text, like, a friend and be like, what are you doing today? You want to come over and write? It's that simple, because everybody's there. Like, and you can find your community of people, but it's just hard to, it would just take so long for that to happen here, because, I mean,
anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you can't compare New York to anywhere. It's New York. Like, it's New York City. It's where everything is, where everything happens. Business happens so quickly. So if you're a musician, you're living in Nashville or LA or New York, it's just things can happen quickly, and you're not the visitor that's coming in for a week. When you live there and you're present and you're showing face, and you're going out to events and you're going to people's shows, and you're in it all the time, so you're on the forefront of people's minds, and you're seeing what's going on in town. And I think that's important, and that's something that took me a while to realize. I was living here and always going there for a week here and there, and you're not part of the community in that way. And I love being a part of it.
You did put out an album or an EP. Was it all co-writes with people in Nashville? Was it the people they met in LA?
It was all co-written. That EP was co-written with the guy who produced it, who's in Nashville. He's a drummer.
Making Sense of?
It's called Making Sense of, and his name's Evan Hutchings. He's mainly a drummer, like a studio and a touring drummer, but he's also a great producer, and he's an amazing writer. So we co-wrote. We were just buddies, and we ended up co-writing that EP together. And he came on to produce it, and I put that out. Oh, geez, 2000. Has it been maybe
14, huh?
Year and a half ago?
Maybe, yeah. And now did this. Was it this EP that kind of helped open that door of licensing for you a little more, or was it just those other co-writing opportunities? Like, how did that door open for you?
I thought it would. I thought that EP, it's definitely like my proudest thing yet. It was finally something that sounded remotely close to what we were playing live.
Mm-hmm.
And that evolves and changes when you release something and then you tour on it. It's going to evolve. And the more you tour, the more your sound changes, and then you go back to record something new. And I look back on, now I think back on the first things I released, and it's just so different from what our live show would sound like now. And I think that's just bound to happen when you're things are going to evolve. It's just how it is. But I thought that would, and it didn't in the way I thought it would. And the licensing thing just kind of happened. When I wasn't expecting it. I mean, I had a licensing deal, and I hadn't gotten any songs placed in anything. And what was signed was that EP and then some songs from my last record. And I got a new licensing deal, but I had to abandon my old licensing deal before this new opportunity. And I thought, well, I haven't gotten anything, with this particular company. Let me see what happens with this. So the new company, same thing happened. They had my new music, and I was getting a few things here and there, but nothing like major. And then on a whim, Justin Beckler and I, it's just so funny because sometimes it takes years for these things to happen. Justin and I have been friends for so long, and he produced my first album, and we met when I was 18, and he had one baby, and now he has 2 children. And and it evolved, and our friendship and musical relationship evolved, and we co-wrote a song together just for fun. And I said, hey, so I have this licensing deal, do you just want to co-write with me on stuff and work on it together, and then let's see what happens. So we co-wrote a song together. Totally sounded different than anything I'd done before, and I sent it over to my licensing company, and it kind of took on a life of its own and started to do its own thing, to a point where my licensing company said, hey, I think you should make this a thing. This sounds really different.
Is this the same company you're with now?
Yeah.
Okay.
They said, this is sort of taken on a life of its own. This song kind of randomly exploded, and we haven't even been pushing it. They were it just kind of happened. And can you guys write more stuff together? And so we did, and then that stuff did well. And so, I thought, well, this is kind of different than, quote unquote, Emily Kopp, the artist. So they basically said, you guys should make a band,
So these were songs that had a different sound than from what you were
totally different live. Sound. It's definitely indie rock music, old sounding, really smashed vocals, and the kind of music that I would just love to play live. It's so fun. And
so what's keeping you from playing that music live?
Oh man, I would need the venues to play it in. It's just it's not the kind of music that would be super fun to play for a small listening room. You would just blow people out of the room. It was just so loud.
In your face, rock and roll.
In your face. It would be the most fun to play, in a tight club or something, So if the opportunity ever came, hell yes, I would love it. And it's really, really fun music. And so we rebranded that. Well, not rebranded. We branded that as its own thing. And
what was the name of that new band that you created with Justin?
It's called Midnight Riot.
Midnight Riot.
Yeah. The irony is that I'm a huge nerd. Beckler is a dad. We don't really make a riot at midnight ever. We're usually just making music. And so it was a funny name because we just thought, we thought of Kitchen Riot. We had some weird names, and then finally we stumbled upon Midnight Riot, and I'm usually there recording at midnight, and we're usually making rock and roll music.
At midnight.
Yeah, but we're not actually, as people, rock and roll people. We're just 2 calm people making really loud, fun, upbeat music. So it just sounded really fitting. We're living out that inner fantasy of being a rock star. And so that's the music that we're making now, which is why I'm in town now.
Okay.
So I'm coming here once a month, once every other month, flying in from Nashville, and just continuing to release music, Midnight Riot music. And that's kind of what's happening now.
Now to brag a little bit on you, Midnight Riot, this new side project, you've had songs placed in JetBlue commercials, Mini Cooper. What was this Mary Kay that you just posted?
Yeah.
Urban Outfitters. It's awesome. Like, you're having a lot of success with this songwriting thing. So from when you first started and wrote your first that you think, okay, it's a cheesy song potential, but like when we all said from day one, yeah, you got it. Like, you're a good songwriter, and now it's starting to show and starting to have your successes.
And I think it just takes like I said, all of those bad. I mean, not bad. There were bad decisions, just maybe not the smartest, like maybe not the most financially responsible or, as far as myself, just responsible, skipping class to go tour for like a week isn't this responsible thing to do. But
100% DIY, learning on your own. I'm sure I was helping you as well, but
100%.
I was learning it as I was going to. So we're both steering the ship blindly and no sense of direction on where we're going. But the key takeaway, I feel, is at least you were trying something and doing something and working hard at it every day. And I feel like, the whole, like, we both listen to Gary Vee, like how he always says, it's patience, patience, do it over and over and over again. It's not going to happen overnight.
It's just so hard to see that light when you're not seeing it.
Sure. When you're playing in year 5 and you're playing in, I don't know, Houma, Louisiana. Maybe not Houma, Louisiana, because that was actually a pretty cool place.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah. But let's say you're playing in a random city in the middle of nowhere, and you're just playing in front of a bartender and sound guy. I mean, it's
so hard to see the light. And it's so not reassuring. It's not the kind of career that's ever reassuring. And it's the kind of thing where the only light that you'll ever see is the light that people give around you. So whether it's like you're a manager, like whether it's you saying, hey, like, we got this, even though deep down I know you're like shitting your pants, or whether it's your best friends saying, like, I really love your new CD. I listen to it all day. Those little mini moments of seeing light just to get you to keep going and not be like, well, this sucks. And what is it, like a Jim Carrey thing he said during a graduation speech? He said, he's like, you could fail at anything, right? So, like, I could go and I can go be try to go to law school or go be an accountant or be a waitress, whatever it may be. Like, I could fail at doing something I don't like.
Right.
So, like, I might as well fail at doing something I do like, right? Like, and then it's so hard to wrap your brain around. Like, it seems so obvious, and it's hard to do it, though. It's actually hard to take action. But once you really wrap your brain around that, it makes sense. Like, you're gonna fail eventually.
Yeah, and regardless of what you do, whether it's, I have friends that have gone to med school. Becoming a doctor or a lawyer or work your way up in a corporate job or whatever. Like, regardless of what you do, like you said, the journey's not easy regardless of what you do. And if you want to try to find some level of success,
and there's no end game.
No.
There's no end game. Like, you're going to fail, and then tomorrow you're going to win.
Right.
And then might win for like a week, and then you're going to fail again. And so it's not, and I'd rather have that ebb and flow of failure and successes doing something I care about instead of doing something that I don't care about.
Right.
And so I think once that realization sets in, it's just an easy decision,
Hey, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed this interview with Emily Kopp. This was part 1. We are going to continue next week with part 2, so I hope to see you all there. If you like what you heard, please share this episode with your friends. Share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook. Please subscribe on iTunes, Podcast Addict, and anywhere podcasts live. We will soon be on SoundCloud and YouTube. I will let you know when we're there. I really appreciate all of your support. I hope to see you again next week in Making It with Chris G. And remember, try new things, be good to people, and in the words of the great Bob Marley, live the life you love.